So page 287, it says this chapter is going to be about fractions. And the first section is about ratios. And a ratio is really just a comparison of two numbers. Like, for instance, you know your test score? You could consider that a ratio. If I tell you you got, for instance, an 81, what does that mean? 81 out of, how many do we usually assume? Out of 100, right? If you got an 81%, we usually think of it as out of 100, right? And so if you got a 75%, 75 out of 100, what does that mean? Well, first of all, you can reduce 75 out of 100, can't you? You can divide them both by 25. 75 divided by 25 is, and 100 divided by 25 is. So what does that mean? The top number is how many you got right. The bottom number is out of what's possible. So what does that mean? You got 3 right out of every 4 problems. For every 4 problems, you got 3 of them right. That's what a ratio is. It's a comparison of two numbers. And it says there on 287, there's a couple of different ways that you can write a ratio. I like to write it like this. I like to write it as a fraction. But you can also write it as, what does the fraction line mean again? Divide by. So you could write it as 3 divided by 4. And you also could write it with a colon. I don't like that way. I don't like the colon. I don't like the colon. But you have your choice. You can write them as whichever of these you choose. I just like the fraction. That's just me personally. I like the fraction. One thing about a ratio, if you can write it in simplest form, you should write it in simplest form. So for instance, they have, write this ratio in simplest form. And they write it with a colon. Well, you know what I do right off the bat? I don't like the colon. So I write it like this, because then I see, oh yeah, it's a fraction. A fraction should be written in simplest, lowest terms, simplest form. So you can ask yourself what goes into both of those. If you don't know, they both end in an even. That means you can divide them both by 2. What is 32 divided by 2? Right? What is 48 divided by 2? Right? Is that lowest terms? They're shaking their head. No. What goes into 16 and 24? Bishop, what do you think? At least 4, right? And if you didn't see 4, they end in even, so you could do 2. But he says 4. Divide by 4, divide by 4. What is 16 divided by 4? What is 24 divided by 4? Is that lowest terms? What goes into both of those? Dose. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So right there, that's your simplified ratio. And I like to write it as a fraction. If you want to write it like this, if you want to write it with a colon, either one of those three. Either one of those three. Does that make sense? So, sort of just reducing fractions today. How about this one? How about the ratio of 25x to 20x? Now, this is algebra, so of course they have to throw in some letters for you. But again, first thing I would do is write it as a fraction because I don't like that colon. What can you do now? Well, what's x over x? X on top, x on bottom, what can you do to those? Right? And then I've got a 25 and a 20. Divide by. So 25 divided by 5 is 5. 20 divided by 5 is 4. So there's your ratio comparing two numbers. Now, I always get the question, could we write this as 4 goes in there once? Could you write it as 1 1/4? Well, they're equivalent, but remember that a ratio is a comparison of two numbers. So in a ratio, you want to leave it as an improper, not as a mixed number. You want to leave it as an improper fraction. Okay? Anybody with questions so far? I'm pretty sure you've done this before, haven't you? How about this one? The ratio of 9x squared y. Seems like we just did this stuff. 6xy squared. What can you do to that one? A couple of things. I've got a 9 and a 6. What can I divide by? So divide by 3, divide by 3. 9 divided by 3 is? 6 divided by 3 is? Now what about the x's? On top, this is x squared. Remember, x squared is x times x, right? And I have a 1x on bottom. I can cancel this one with one of those, which means I'm still going to have one left on top, right? That's sort of what we were doing in the last chapter. And same thing with the y squared down here. Y squared is y times y. So I can cancel this one with one of those, and I'll still have one left on bottom. And remember, if it's on bottom, it's got to stay on the bottom, right? I had a couple people on the test moving it up and down, up and down. I don't know if they just got mixed up or what. But if it's on top, it's got to stay on top. If it's on bottom, it's got to stay on bottom. So this would be a ratio then. It's basically just reducing a fraction. But the ratio is 3x to 2y is your ratio there. Anybody with questions so far? Now, the only other thing about ratios is they have to be in the same units. So if I ask you, what is the ratio of 36 minutes to 1 hour? Well, just like over here, remember when our x and x canceled? Well, your units also have to cancel. And the only way they'll cancel is if they're the same. So you either have to change this 36 minutes to hours, or you have to change the 1 hour to minutes. Do you have any ideas? He says, change the hour to 60 minutes. What do you think about that? He thinks too. What about you? Great minds think alike. So they all say 1 hour is equivalent to 60 minutes. So instead of that 1 hour, we're going to write it as 60 minutes. And now you have minutes over minutes, just like the x over x here. We can cancel if they're the same. And you want to make sure they cancel. Minutes over minutes cancels, it crosses out. And 36 over 60, what goes into both of those? Maybe 6. What's 36 divided by 6? I think it's 6. What's 60 divided by 6? Oh. Is it simplified? Donahue, is it simplified?
No.
What can I divide by?
2.
Thank you for answering. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. So my simplified fraction, 6 divided by 2 is 3. 10 divided by 2 is? So the ratio of 3 to 5. Does that make sense? Should we do one more just for fun? No? Oh, how about one more just for fun? 9 inches to 5 feet. The ratio of 9 inches to 5 feet. 9 inches to 5 feet. They're not the same. Now what? Do you know how many inches in a foot? 12 inches in a foot. Oh boy. See that? 5 feet? Every one of those feet is 12 inches in the first foot, 12 inches in the second, 12 inches in the third foot, 12 inches in the fourth foot, 12 inches in the fifth foot. How many is that altogether? 60. 60. 60. Otherwise, you could have just multiplied that by 12. 5 times 12, 60 inches. Now we just need to reduce the 9 over 60. Can you reduce by 3? Divide by 3. Oh yeah, and the inches will cancel. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. 60 divided by 3 is, and I don't think that'll reduce anymore. I just get 3 over 20. Does that make sense? One thing I wanted to show you, it's not in there, but I think you'll come across it. The ratio of, for instance, 4 to 1. Remember, a ratio is a comparison of two numbers. It compares two numbers. So if you're going to write this as a fraction, you should leave that 1 in the bottom when it's a ratio instead of just a regular old fraction. You should leave that 1 in the bottom. It's a ratio of 4 to 1. So in ratios, if there's a 1 in the denominator, you should actually leave it there. And I think that's all I have to say. I think that's all I have to say. Do you have any questions? Are there any questions? Does anyone have a question? Anybody? Anybody? I'm on page 289. $290. We'll go 1 to 22. Happy Monday. 1 to 22. Oh, for Pete's sake. Well, somebody should have said something. You guys, I'm such a dingbat. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. What a dingbat. Well, that's just wonderful. They spent the whole time looking at the wall. Happy Monday. I'm so sorry, you guys. Okay, so here, this part, they have to cross off. They have to be in the same units. If you have minutes and hours, you have to change these hours to 60 minutes. Right? Otherwise, it's just reducing fractions. I'm so sorry. Oh boy. Oh boy. Gonna be one of those days. Gonna be one of those days.